Now, moving to the final topic of the lecture of our topic known as the drugs acting on the endocrine gland. So, we are going to discuss now the drugs which are used for treating the erectile dysfunction. Okay, so we are having the two example, sildenafil and tadalafil. These are the two drugs which are routinely used for treating the erectile dysfunction. One of the brand of the sildenafil, which was very well famous, was the Viagra, and it was uh, branded and manufactured by the Pfizer, one of the topmost pharmaceutical company. So that contains the sildenafil, and the next example in this category is the tadalafil. So these two are the drugs they are used for treating the erectile dysfunction. Okay, so now I think I have already given you the introduction of these drugs, that is sildenafil and the tadalafil. So how these drugs they are going to use for treating the erectile dysfunction. So these drugs are the phosphodiesterase 5 inhibitor. These are the inhibitor of the phosphodiesterase type 5. So it is one of the circulating enzyme which is responsible for the catalytic hydrolysis of the cyclic GMP in smooth muscles of the arteries in the penis as well as in the lungs. So this PD5 is causing the deactivation of CGMP, decreasing its overall circulating concentration. So now, if we are going to inhibit this PD5, the concentration of CGMP is going to get increased. So inhibitor of this particular phosphodiesterase have been shown to relax the arteries in the penis. So thus it allows the corpus cavernosum to fill with the blood and aiding in an erection. So this is the mechanism how this sildenafil and the tadalafil they are helping in the erectile dysfunction, isn't it? So on the left hand side I have shown the mechanism of action, normal mechanism of the action of PD5 enzyme. So when PD5 is circulating in the blood vessels in the smooth muscles, so there is constriction of blood vessel is there. When sildenafil or tadalafil is administered, the PDE5 is inhibited. There is increase in the circulating level of the CGMP, and now the blood vessels are they are going to get relaxed, especially the blood vessels of the arteries they are going to get relaxed, and this mechanism will going to help in the erection of the penis. So let us look at the structure of sildenafil. Okay, so now sildenafil it is the methyl piperazine derivative. What we can see, it is the sulfonyl methyl piperazine derivative. So its IUPAC name is 1,4-ethoxy 3 in bracket 6,7 dihydro 1 methyl 7 oxo 3 propyl 1H pyrazolo 4,3-D pyrimidine 5-yl phenyl sulfonyl 4-methyl piperazine, isn't it? Okay, so the structure is quite complex, but how we can remember this structure? This is the derivative of methyl piperazine. Then we have to draw the sulfonyl group, then phenyl group, and to that phenyl group we have to attach the pyrazolopyrimidine ring. Okay, pyrazolopyrimidine ring and the remaining substituent. So that is the structure of the sildenafil. So I told you before that sildenafil it's used for the treating the erectile dysfunction is accidental, because when scientists were developing the drug against PAH, pulmonary artery hypertension, isn't it? So in that condition, this drug was mainly what you can say, it is discovered by that for that PAH. But when this drug was administered to the patient, the sexual function of that individual has dramatically got increased. So when this observation has came into the picture, then this drug was marketed for its use for treating the erectile dysfunction. So now this is one of the very good example in drug discovery. Though you are going to target the treatment of hypertension, you may have the advantage of getting the drug which is used for the erectile dysfunction. But I also told you one thing, that when this drug is used for the relaxing the blood vessels, so another of prescription use is that the athletes, they were using the sildenafil and the tadalafil for increasing their performance in the game, in the sports, because the relaxation, because it was believed that, it is believed that when the blood vessels, they are going to get release, the nutrient, they are going to get enter in a faster way into the smooth muscles. So the smooth muscles are getting the nutrient at a faster rate, and there is increase in the performance is there. But most of the sports agency, they have put the ban on both of the drug. So this drug is only used for treating the erectile dysfunction and not for increasing the physical activity or performance in the sports. Okay, so the next example in our syllabus is the tadalafil. Okay, so this tadalafil is also the piperazine derivative, but that piperazine is having the double bond O structure in its cyclic ring. So its IUPAC name is quite complex. It consists of the indole ring as well as the pyrazino and the pyrido rings. So its IUPAC name is 6R trans 613 benzodioxole 5-il 2,3,6,7,12 12A hexahydro 2-methyl pyrazino 1,2,1,6 pyrido 3,4B indole 1,4-dione. Okay, now this is the name of this tadalafil. So now this tadalafil is the potent inhibitor of PDE5. It received the FDA approval for the treatment of erectile dysfunction in December 2003. Because of its half-life of 17.5 hours, it is marketed as a 36-hour treatment. Okay, so after 36 hours, the patient has to take the tadalafil. So these are the two drugs which are especially used for treating the erectile dysfunction. Okay, now the last topic of the discussion in the drugs acting on the endocrine gland is the thyroid and the anti-thyroid drugs. Okay, so if we going to see day by day the metabolism pattern of most of the individual, it is going to get disturbed. So one of the factor of disturbing the metabolism is either increase or decrease in the secretion of the thyroid hormone. So which are those thyroid hormones? These thyroid hormones are the T3 and T4, which are synthesized into the thyroid gland, which is located at the neck, isn't it? Which is located at the neck and is under the control of the hypothalamus, isn't it? Okay, so now from the brain there is a release of thyroid releasing hormone, which is going to which is going to act on the anterior pituitary gland to release the thyroid stimulating hormone, that is called as the TSH. That TSH causes the activation of the thyroid gland, and now that thyroid gland is going to release the thyroid hormones, that is T4 and the T3, and the release of these hormones are going to target the tissues isn't it? And that tissues are now going to show you the what you can say, the metabolic fate of glucose, proteins, and several other substances, isn't it? Okay. So now the metabolic disorders, they are arised due to increase or decrease in the secretion of these T3 and T4, isn't it? Okay. So now, as we know that these T3, T4, they are going to regulate the metabolism. They are having a very important role to keep control on several metabolic diseases. Okay. So most of the individuals, they are suffering from the two disorders, that is called as the basic disorder called as the hyperthyroidism as well as the hypothyroidism, isn't it? So therefore we need to understand this topic called as thyroid and the anti-thyroid drug. Okay. So now when we are going to use the thyroid and when we have to use the anti-thyroid agent, that first we need to understand. We are going to use the thyroid hormones or the thyroid derivative in the condition called as the hypothyroidism, when there is a decreased concentration of circulating T3 and T4 is there. So in that condition we need to administer externally the T3 and T4, isn't it? So this is the condition called as the hypothyroidism, and in the hypothyroidism we are going to administer the T3 and T4. Now when we have to use the anti-thyroid drugs, okay, so whenever there is higher circulating level, whenever there is higher concentration of circulating T3 and T4 is there, so that condition is called as hyperthyroidism. So in hyperthyroidism we have to use the anti-thyroid drugs. Okay. So keep this basic thing in your mind. The thyroid derivatives example is T3 and T4, that we are using in the clinical condition called as hypothyroidism, and the anti-thyroid drug we are using in the hyperthyroidism. Okay. So this is the main use of these thyroid and anti-thyroid drug. So let us look at its regulation and how they are synthesized and how it is going to get regulated. So as now you are going to observe in the picture that is provided, the thyroid gland, which is located at the center of the neck, it is under the control of the hypothalamus, under the also control of the brain, what we can say. So now this pituitary gland, it contains the globules. Okay, these globules, they are called as the thyroid follicles. Okay, these thyroid follicles, centrally it contains the colloid, a colloidal material, and that colloidal material is surrounded by a very minute follicular cells, very minute follicular cells. Okay. So now how the synthesis of the thyroid hormone is occurring in this gland. So now into this gland it is supplied with the capillaries. Okay. So now whatever the iodine we are going to take from the food, that iodine is trapped from these capillaries and then it is provided to these follicles surrounding the colloid by the sodium ion sympater. It is one of the channel that is used to getting entry inside the circulating iodine. So now this iodine is coming inside that follicular cell, and now that iodine is going to get combined with the thyroglobulin. Okay, and by the process of exocytosis, that is released into the colloidal matter, and then it is stored into that thyroid globule. Now in the follicular cell, actually there is a presence of iodine as well as there is presence of thyroglobulin. This thyroglobulin and iodine, they combine with each other into the colloidal matter, and then there is formation of T4 and T3. Now, how these T4 and T3 they look like? Okay. So now if you are going to observe the three structures onto your left hand side, okay, you will observe the first structure thyronin, isn't it? The next structure is the liothyronin, which is called as the T3, and the last structure is the levothyroxine, which is called as the T4, isn't it? So in this PPT, I think there is a problem of the format is there. So T3, T4 they are attached with each other in the name. So don't confuse with that T3 and T4. The topmost structure is the thyronin, which is not contain the iodine. The middle structure is the liothyronin, that is called as the T3, and the bottom structure is the levothyroxine, isn't it? So now what is the structural difference in these three structures shown in this slide? Thyronin, it is devoid of the iodine. It doesn't contain any iodine. Then liothyronin, this is the T3, in which the 3 iodine, okay, that have been shown over here by the red color, the 3 iodines are substituted onto the phenyl ring, and the T4, the bottom structure, it contains the 4 iodine substituted onto the thyronin, isn't it? Okay, so now these are the 3 circulating hormones: thyronin, then liothyronin, and the levothyroxine. Liothyronin is the T3 and levothyroxine is the T4. Okay, so let us concentrate onto the mechanism. So under the influence of the hypothalamus, when there is secretion of TSH is there, that TSH will cause the release of this T3 and T4 from that colloidal matter into the capillaries, into the blood vessel, isn't it? So now these T3 and T4, they come at the target tissues, and then they are going to get bind with to the carrier protein. Now that carrier protein is going to get released, and that T4 is coming inside the cell. Now that T4 is going to get converted to the T3. T3 is going to get bind with the protein. That protein allows its transport into the nucleus, and into the nuclear thyroid receptor, this T3 is going to get bind. We know that the thyroid receptors are the nuclear receptor. Okay, so that T3 is going to get attached to that nuclear receptor and causing the changes in the metabolism pattern. Okay, so this is the mechanism of this T3 and T4. Now let us look at its actual application. Okay, levothyroxine. So first look at the IUPAC name. The IUPAC name is 2S2-amino 3,4,4-hydroxy 3,5-diiodophenoxy 3,5-diiodophenyl propionic acid. Okay, so now this is the levoisomer of the thyroxine. So it is used for replacement therapy for decreased thyroid function. Okay, so now decreased thyroid function, especially we are going to observe in the goiter. So actually in the goiter there is enlargement of the gland is there, thyroid gland is there, isn't it? Why? Because to trap the circulating iodine, it requires the iodine. So for trapping that circulating iodine, it is going to get enlarged, isn't it? So therefore this levothyroxine is used in the treatment of hypothyroidism. Okay, so this is the use of the T4. Okay, so now this is the important use of this T4. Now let us look at the anti-thyroid drug. Okay, so initially I told you that the anti-thyroid drugs, they are basically used in the treatment of the hyperthyroidism, when a circulating level of T3 and T4 is more, when your thyroid gland is going to synthesize more and more amount of T3 and T4. In that case, we need to administer the anti-thyroid drug. In our syllabus, we are having only 2 examples, isn't it? So always remember these antithyroid drugs, their aim is to limit the synthesis of T3 and T4. So there are several drugs are there. So this diagram actually illustrate how different drugs they are going to act as the antithyroid drug. So some of the drug they limit the transport of the iodine inside the thyroid gland. So some of the perchlorates are there and thiocyanates are there. They are going to limit the entry of iodine into the thyroid gland. Now that iodine entered inside the thyroid gland will going to interact with the peroxidase enzyme to form T3 and T4. So this step is very crucial step. Okay, conversion of that iodide into the iodine, isn't it? So that step is inhibited by acting onto the peroxidase enzyme by certain thioamides. Okay, so these thioamides they are the inhibitor of the peroxidase enzyme. Okay, so now when the peroxidase enzyme is going to get inhibit, then the monoiodinated thyroxine and diiodinated thyroxine as well as the T3 and T4 its synthesis is going to get inhibited, isn't it? So some iodides they are also going to inhibit the proteolysis, which is the next step into synthesis of T3 and the T4, isn't it? Okay, so now in our syllabus we are having the thioamides, so we are going to concentrate on these thioamides. So several categories of the drugs that have been shown over here. So antithyroid drugs they are having several categories. The first category is the inhibition of hormone synthesis. So example is the propylthiouracil and methimazole, which is in our syllabus. Then the blockage of the hormone release, iodides and iodinated contrast media. Then radioactive iodine, that is iodine 131. Then some of the anion inhibitors, that is perchlorates and thiocyanates, and some of the beta blocker drug, for example the propranolol. So this is only for your understanding purpose. So this is the classification of antithyroid drugs, but we have to only concentrate onto the 2 drugs which are going to target the peroxidase enzyme. So first structure is the propylthiouracil. Look at the structure. Okay, a structure has similarity with the uracil. Uracil is the pyrimidine nucleotide, and it is one of the what you can say the nuclear base. Okay, uracil. So it is the propylthiouracil. So from the uracil, one of the oxygen is replaced with the sulfur, and a side chain have been attached. Side chain in this structure have been shown by the R group. If that R is N-propyl, then we are calling that uracil as propylthiouracil. This propylthiouracil, it is the potent inhibitor of the peroxidase. Okay. Now the next drug that is in our syllabus is the methimazole. Structure is very simple, isn't it? So it is the imidazole derivative in which one of the nitrogen is having the methyl group and the one of the carbon is substituted with the sulfur. That is the structure of the methimazole. So propylthiouracil and methimazole both are the potent inhibitor of peroxidase. So by inhibiting the peroxidase, these agent they are going to limit the concentration of circulating T3 and T4, isn't it? So this is the structure of propylthiouracil and the methimazole. Okay, so as the length of video is increasing, I am limiting my explanation at this point, and the interaction we will discuss this thing in more details.